I don't want to live in a country where if the FBI knocks on your door, the first thing you have to do is wonder whether the agent is a Republican or a Democrat. And thanks to Mr. Wray's predecessor, that's where we are, folks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my comments will be directed to Mr. Abate. Am I saying that right?
Yes, Senator.
And Mr. Olson, perhaps to all of you. No fair-minded person can doubt the efficacy of Section 702. But here's the problem you've got. Just when the FBI, which I think is the most effective law enforcement agency in all of human history. But people are people, and just when the FBI has rebuilt itself after former Director Hoover, along comes Mr. Wray's predecessor, who clearly did not understand how to exercise power either intelligently or maturely. He decides to investigate in a public way not only one, but both candidates for President of the United States, and to do it publicly, and to leak like the Titanic. He investigates the Republican nominee with the flimsiest of evidence that has been manufactured that he, the FBI director at that time, didn't even bother to examine. And then he turns to the Democratic nominee with respect to her email servers, investigates her, calls a press conference, says, well, I am not going to prosecute her, but she needs to clean up her act. She's been negligent. And then a little time goes by, and he opens up the investigation again in a public way on the Democratic nominee and says, I'm opening this up. And a few days later, he closes it down. Might have cost her to the election. And then we start having reports, predictably, come out after that, the Durham report, the Mueller report, the Horowitz report. And it did extraordinary damage to the FBI and, frankly, to the Department of Justice. Now, Mr. Wray, who I supported to replace Mr. Comey, has said he has reformed the FBI. We just don't know how. We have no idea. I don't have any idea. I do know stuff keeps happening. I mean, one of your agents that was involved in the Mr. Hunter Biden's investigation goes on social media, apparently for a long period of time, and trashes all Republicans. He got fired only because Senator Grassley caught him. And all this hurts you. And it makes a fair-minded American look at this and go, whoa, you know, this is enormous power you have, and it can be used for the greater good, but it also can hurt people. And we've got to come up with a way to make sure that the right people are using this law enforcement tool. And that's the problem you got, gentlemen. If I were you, I'm not. I don't have your expertise, and I thank you all for your service. But if I were you, I'd try to be coming up with a way to suggest to Congress how you can check this power that you have so that the FBI and the Department of Justice and the other agencies can can regain their reputation. And tell us what you think. That doesn't mean we won't come with our own ideas. You know, senators don't take orders. Most of them barely take suggestions. But it would be helpful to me if you would come up with your own ideas to address these concerns, not just our concerns, but the concerns of the American people. I don't want to live in a country where if the FBI knocks on your door, the first thing you have to do is wonder whether the agent is a Republican or a Democrat. And thanks to Mr. Ray's predecessor, that's where we are, folks. I know that's a cold dish of truth, but I think that's the truth. So I'm gonna read your testimony. I need to learn more about this, but help us figure out this problem. Thank you, gentlemen.
Chair Durbin has stepped out.
At the end, when Senator John Kennedy says quietly, slowly, in that unmistakable cadence that always lands like a hammer wrapped in velvet, that's a cold dish of truth. But I think that's the truth. That is the point in this hearing, when the room goes quiet, not because of volume, but because of moral indictment. There is no rage in that line. There is no theater. There is a man stating out loud that we now live in a moment where tens of millions of Americans no longer know if the most powerful domestic police agency in the history of the human species is neutral, or whether we have drifted into an era where federal power has absorbed political identity as an operating function of itself. He wasn't ranting. He wasn't posturing. He was describing the collapse of the single most important assumption a free country must have for its justice and its legitimacy to exist at all. He said out loud, right now, Americans do not know if the knock on their door is partisan. He said out loud, this is where we are. That moment is the cinematic moment of this hearing. That moment is the turning point of this entire generation's constitutional story. Because what Kennedy is describing, this scar, is not theoretical, it is not historic, it is not academic, it is present tense. He is referencing Comey. He is referencing elections. He is referencing the two candidates for president being investigated at the same time by the same federal agency in the same cycle, with leaks, with selective narrative release, with the power to tilt electoral outcome not through persuasion, but through selective revelation and selective silence. He is referencing Durham, Mueller, Horowitz, not as partisan weapons, but as accumulation, as sediment, of a system that has lost public trust not by rhetoric, but by its own track record in the empirical record of the last decade. And then he says, we have no idea what the reforms even are. We are told it is fixed, but we are not allowed to see how. We are told, just trust the agency that lost the trust. That is why this moment matters. This is not a policy disagreement. This is not a 702 subsection dispute. This is not a difference of legal interpretation. This is the moral crisis of the American system. Because democratic legitimacy is not a philosophical abstraction. It is a lived condition. It is a living constitutional organism. It requires the people to believe that the rule of law is politically colorblind, or else the rule of law stops being law and becomes merely the adjustable blade of whichever institutional faction controls the heights of the system. And Kennedy, in one of the most important rhetorical indictments of the last few years, said that we are now in a place where Americans reflexively must ask, is the FBI red or blue? That question alone proves the scale of the constitutional emergency. Because once we cannot assume neutrality, once we cannot assume impartiality, we are no longer in the old republic. We are in something new, something unstable, something dangerously transitional. Kennedy was not defending all past FBI authority. He was acknowledging its necessity. He was acknowledging that 702 works, that it is effective, that national security relies on it. And that is what makes this moment morally heavier, because he was not arguing to destroy the power. He was arguing to constrain it so that it deserves to exist. He was arguing from patriotism, not destruction. He was pleading for the agency to propose its own limits. He was pleading for the agency to help Congress reestablish the moral guardrails that Hoover destroyed, that Comey then re-destroyed decades later, and that the modern era has still not rebuilt. He was pleading for them, in public, to take responsibility. Because responsibility is the only force that can salvage legitimacy. And when a senior senator is begging the most powerful law enforcement arm in the country to restrain itself, to propose its own boundaries, to limit its own authority, to save its own reputation, that is the clearest signal in American civic life that the moment for quiet repair is over. The moment now is for open structural confrontation. This clip will be remembered. This clip is the pivot point where the American public sees clearly what Washington insiders have known privately. We are now living in a moment where the future of liberty depends not on left or right, not on party gain, not on the scoreboard of the next election, but on whether the people themselves still believe that law is above party and not downstream of it. The future of this country will be determined by whether we rebuild it.
Thank you, Mr.
The
Chairman.
future of this country will be determined by whether Congress forces
I
this
guess my
accountability
comments will be directed
bends
to
on it.
Mr. Abate.
And the future
Am I
of
saying
this
that right?
country will be determined by whether
Yes,
the people
Senator.
insist,
And Mr. Olson,
absolutely insist,
perhaps to all of
that
you.
the government is never again allowed to pick and
No
choose
fair-minded
political
person
targets as a tactical
can
weapon
doubt the
disguised as neutral
efficacy
enforcement.
of
This is
the
Liberty Congress
of Section
USA.
702.
This is why these hearings matter. This is why
but
these
here's the
truths must
problem
be
you've got.
confronted in the open, cold, unsanitized, direct.
Just when the
Because a free
FBI,
nation survives only
which
if
I
its
think,
people refuse to let the permanent state become the moral arbiter of reality.
which I think
itself.
is the most
Subscribe to Liberty Congress of USA.
effective